My son, you are cursed. The fortune teller, Master Zoltar, dropped the bombshell. You will never father a child with your wife, and neither your money or prayers will change anything. It has been sealed by fate. Your generation will end with you. The words hit Mr. George like a thunderbolt. It was too hard to swallow. So what will happen to my empire, my wealth and properties after I die? He asked. That is not all, Zoltar continued. The heir to your empire will come from a strange woman's womb. Not too long from now you will find him, and when you do, take him home immediately and make him your own. Now go home and watch, for fate is about to manifest. George and Natalie Donald had been married for 13 years. George came from a family generation of billionaires, and they lived in a world of private jets, sprawling estates, and business deals that moved millions. Yet, their greatest desire, a child, remained painfully out of reach. For years they had tried everything, specialists, treatments, prayers, but nothing worked. Natalie visited all the best doctors, and they claimed nothing was wrong with her womb. George buried himself in work, but late at night he would stare at old family portraits, wondering if the family legacy would die with him. He was growing older by the day, and he knew he had to do something urgent about it. Then came the whisper of a solution, not from a doctor, but from fate itself. A fortune teller known for his ability to accurately predict the future, Master Zoltar. George visited the temple alone, without telling Natalie. He was desperate to find out what fate had in store for him. Mr. George entered Master Zoltar's temple, the only place he turned to when all else failed. The fortune teller had never been wrong before. Not about business deals, not about rivals, not about anything. In fact, he was the biggest reason for the billionaire's success in business. Great Master Zoltar, he greeted. I have come out of desperation. It is obvious that the spirits have a hand in my inability to bear a son, an heir to continue our legacy. I need to find out what to do to put my house in order, Great One. The Great One consulted briefly in his shrine. When he returned, he shook his head in pity. Your bloodline will end with you, Mr. George, Zoltar announced abruptly. No son will ever come from your body. The words hit George like a thunderbolt. It was too bitter to be swallowed. What do you mean, Master? George stammered. Who will inherit my empire? Your father promised to come back to you on his deathbed, Zoltar announced, awakening George's senses. He will surely return, but through another woman's womb. It will be a boy, with the same face as your father. When you see him, take him. That is your only path to redemption. How will I know? George demanded, confused. Where will I search for him? You will know, Zoltar said, eyes glistening with assurance. Now go home and watch. You will soon find your missing son. George left more confused than when he arrived. But Zoltar's words burned in his mind. Somewhere, somehow, his heir was waiting. He just had to find him. And when he did, he would take what fate owed him. Years passed with no sign of the promised child. George's hope faded with each empty day. He began to doubt the diviner's prophecy. Then one day, during his usual morning drive to work on a busy road, traffic slowed to a crawl. As George waited for the cars to move, his eyes wandered around and caught an unusual sight. Through his tinted window, he noticed a homeless woman standing by a wall and clutching a baby. Something made him look twice. The child turned its face toward him. George's breath caught. This baby looked like who? His father. Those sharp cheekbones. The exact shape of his father's piercing eyes. Hands trembling, he pulled an old photograph from his wallet. The resemblance was impossible, yet undeniable. The light turned green. Cars honked. But George sat frozen, staring as the woman disappeared in his rearview mirror. He wanted to go out and take a closer look. Was this the boy Master Zoltar talked about? How could his successor be the son of a homeless woman? All day, the boy's face haunted him. Meetings blurred together. His untouched lunch grew cold. Could this be the child Zoltar promised? The one he was meant to take? The prophecy suddenly felt terrifyingly real. That night, Mr. George could not fall asleep. His wife was not at home, and so he stayed up all night, wondering what to do. He remembered Master Zoltar's words. When you see him, take him home. Do not waste even a day. Mr. George had no choice. At midnight, he grabbed his coat and left, driving alone to the place he had found her. The streets were empty when he arrived. The woman wasn't on the corner anymore, but a faint light came from a broken-down shack nearby. George's hands shook as he stepped out of the car. His shoes crunched on gravel as he approached. Through a cracked window, he saw her, curled on the floor, fast asleep. The baby lay wrapped in her arms. Mr. George took a deep breath and approached. Inch by inch, he reached for the child. The moment his fingers touched the blanket, his breath stopped. The transfer took seconds. The baby sighed but did not wake. George clutched him to his chest and backed out silently. In the car, he finally looked at the boy's face in the dim dashboard light. This was his father. For real. He looked every inch like the old man who had died years ago. "Welcome, father," he whispered, kissed the baby's face, and drove home, not looking back even once. When Natalie returned, George presented the baby with a prepared story. "I found him abandoned by the street. He lied to get her sympathy. He was lying alone on the cold floor. Everyone just looked at it and walked past, so I had to take him." Natalie hesitated only briefly before embracing the child. "He looks just like your father," she whispered, cradling him in her arms. "He's so calm and peaceful." They named him Donald, after George's late father. The resemblance was uncanny enough to silence questions. Friends and family accepted the adoption without suspicion. "He's clearly meant to be yours," they said. Legal papers were signed, and announcements made. Donald became a part of the family in every sense. Natalie loved the boy. She doted on Donald, calling him their miracle child. George watched them together, relief and unease twisting inside him. The prophecy had been fulfilled. But in quiet moments, he wondered if this was truly the end of the story. Baby Donald grew up so quickly in Mr. George's household, not as a stranger but as their own. Little Donald had a cousin named Derek. During the weekends, his parents often took him to Derek at his parents' house. As the two youngsters played around in the mansion, Donald's eyes flashed at the child keeper, Mrs. Cynthia, who watched after Derek. He would often smile at her. "I like her, Aunt Cynthia," he would say to Derek. "She is a nice woman." And Cynthia would smile back, wondering why this son of a billionaire was always smiling up at her. On subsequent visits to Derek, Donald would take little gifts along, intending to pass them to Aunt Cynthia. "Surprise," he would say, passing her a hairband, a small cake, or something else. Meaningless gifts that somehow communicated attention and a desire to make her smile. Cynthia would accept the gifts gracefully, smiling and patting him on the head. She liked the boy, his sweet, pleasant spirit and smile, and his warm eyes. Those eyes reminded Cynthia of her baby boy, the one that had suddenly gone missing years ago. The cold Tuesday night, she had woken up in the abandoned shack, and behold, her baby was not in her arms. Her hands scrambled the floor, searching the dirty blankets. He was gone. Cynthia had searched for him across the city, showing passers-by his picture and begging for attention. She visited the police station, but they were careless about her case. No one paid attention to the homeless woman. They thought she was a lunatic. Cynthia's world had crumbled. As the days went by, her hopes of ever seeing her child again faded. She continued to do odd jobs to survive on the streets, until one day, 4 years later, a wealthy family in New York, the Richard family, accepted her to work as a child keeper and watch over their son, Derek. And now, Cynthia was smiling down at Donald, Derek's cousin, and reminding herself of her son's eyes. "Will you follow me home, Aunt Cynthia?" he asked innocently. "I want to show you my house." "No, sweetheart," she smiled back, touched by his kind words. "I have to stay here and look after Derek, okay?" George and Natalie rounded up family talk with the Richards and came to take Donald away. George observed Donald's attachment with Cynthia and frowned. Why would the son of a billionaire get so close to an ordinary maid? As they drove back home that evening, he warned Donald about her. "I don't want to see you around with that maid," George said, looking into his eyes. "You do not belong to her level. Is that clear?" "But she is a nice woman," Donald argued. "She looks after me and Derek." "I like her. She looks after you because she is paid to," George snarled. "You are the son of a billionaire. You belong to royalty. You do not have anything in common with a mere housemaid." Donald was not listening. He was thinking about the next gift to give Cynthia on their next visit. As the years went by, Cynthia and Donald became quite close with each other. Donald was now 8 years old, and he was growing really fast. Every weekend, while his mates went on fancy trips with their parents, Donald would sit by with Cynthia all day, enjoying her company as he told her things about himself, his schoolwork, his dreams and fantasies. Cynthia opened up about her missing son. She told him he reminded her so much about him. "You mean someone took your baby just like that?" Donald asked, too stunned to believe it. "Why don't you find him?" "I have searched for him in every place," Cynthia said. "All my efforts have been in vain." Cynthia's story struck a deep chord in his heart, and it brought them even closer. Donald often played with his cousin Derek, but spent much more time with Cynthia. The Richards were worried about this, and so were the Georges. What was so special about Cynthia? And why did he draw so close to her? Then, 11 months later, something terrible happened. Donald's cousin and friend Derek died after battling leukemia for 2 years. Donald was devastated and heartbroken, and he mourned his friend for weeks. The Richards' home, once filled with laughter, stood silent. Derek's death, however, came with a big question mark and a test of loyalty. Would his friendship with Cynthia endure, now that the center was shaken? Or was this only going to keep them apart forever? 1 month later, George, Natalie, and Donald showed up in Richard's mansion. Donald got out of the car and ran inside, eagerly calling on Cynthia. He had missed her all these days, and he could not wait to see her face again. "Cynthia, Cynthia," he called breathlessly. "Where is she?" "She left." One of the housemaids dropped the bombshell. Donald's heart began to pound. "She's not here anymore." Donald felt blood dry from his face. He desperately prayed that this was a prank. "She left after we lost Derek," the maid explained. "Her job was to look after him, and since he is no more, she had to go." "No, no!" Donald screamed, running across the corridor to the living room where his parents sat with Mr. Richard. "Why did you sack her?" he cried. "Why did you sack Aunt Cynthia?" "We didn't need her anymore," Richard explained. "After we lost Derek, she had to—" Richard could not finish the sentence. The mere mention of his late son brought back memories that choked him to tears. Donald sniffed and left the room, feeling a lump in his throat. The days that followed were days of sadness and sorrow. In just a matter of days, he had lost 2 of his closest companions to circumstances he could not control. But losing Cynthia was a tragedy he could not cope with. She did not even drop a letter or anything to help him find her. He thought of her every single day, her memories never escaping his mind. "Donald has refused to eat for 3 days now," Natalie complained anxiously to George. "He keeps asking about the nanny. He says he wants to find her." George took a deep breath and glared at his wife, masking the concern that showed on his face. "He will come to himself," he said. "Just allow him to be. But make sure he eats something." As Natalie walked out of the room, George sat still, thinking about Donald. He was 11 years old, intelligent, strong, and promising. The future successor of the Kensington family. "I have to introduce him to the family business," he said to himself. "He is ripe enough to start learning." Donald was in his room, sketching an image of Cynthia and Derek when his dad came in. "Prepare," he announced. "Tomorrow I will be taking you along to my office. The time has come to put you in line." Every day after that, Donald followed his father to the business office. He watched Mr. George sign multi-million business deals, shake hands with presidents and billionaires, and all the big names in the country, and issue commands to thousands of people who ran the empire. Young Donald observed and learnt things quickly. One day, he would be the one in charge, the one to replace Mr. George and run this magnificent empire. Yet each day, after he returned home, he would sit up for hours and reminisce all the time he had spent with Cynthia. During the past 2 years, he had not found any company or friendship that could be compared with hers. He missed her every single day and often dreamt about seeing her again. Meanwhile, in a city far, far away, Cynthia was quietly rebuilding her life. After leaving the Richard family, she had found work as a caregiver in a private hospital. The pay was enough to keep her going, and every day, as she read the news, she kept a close eye on the George family. Every piece of information she read about them, she kept it tucked away in a corner. She still thought about Donald, the lovely little boy that had been a source of light and laughter to her. Cynthia knew he was no longer a boy, but was quickly growing into manhood, when he would be ready to take over his father's empire. One day, as she read the papers, a particular news item made the headlines. Natalie, George's wife and Donald's mother, had died in a plane crash. Cynthia gasped with shock at the bad news. How was he feeling? She wondered, feeling sorry for him. He had lost his cousin some years ago, and now it was his mother. She wished she could reach out to him and offer some comfort, but she held herself back. Instead, she wrote a letter, expressing how sorry she felt, and mailed it to him. It took some weeks for the post office to deliver the letter to Donald. "She's alive!" Donald exclaimed with excitement after reading Cynthia's letter. He felt his heart lightening up with joy. Cynthia was still out there, and cared enough to send him a letter. He had never forgotten her all these years, not even for a day. Cynthia's letter rekindled his hope of meeting her once again. Even though she had left no directions on how to find her, the assurance that she was still alive and out there was enough to keep him going. Out of excitement, he showed the letter to his father, but Mr. George crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. "Why do you still think about her, Donald?" George bellowed. "Your mother is dead here, and all you can think of is a nanny who left here so many years ago. Can't you see what is happening? Can't you see that your mother left an important role that has to be filled? Why can't you put that strange lady out of your mind and focus on the important task ahead, huh? If this is all you can think about after losing your mom, then I can see where your interest lies. You have to man up, Donald, or the empire will suffer in your hands." After saying that, Mr. George took it upon himself to place more business responsibilities on Donald's shoulders. He was growing older, and the empire would be passed on into his hands someday. Donald's workload doubled overnight. He began to travel more extensively, meeting with investors and closing deals for their businesses. He had to work hard to show his father that he was capable of taking over after he resigned. He also worked hard to put Cynthia out of his mind and forget about her, but that was in vain. Every night when he sat alone, he imagined her sitting close to him and listening as he talked about his day. Fate had destined them to always dream about each other, and try as hard as he could, she would never stay out of his mind. What did she look like now? He often wondered. Was she married? Had she found her missing son? Donald had a million questions about Cynthia, and he hoped one day he would find out for himself. Years passed, and life became very busy for Donald. He traveled extensively around the world on business trips, hardly having time to enjoy himself as a young man. Following Natalie's death, Mr. George's rivals had become more fierce and competitive than ever, trying to outshine his empire in every way, and the burden of the business fell on Donald. He kept making the headlines on world news, and Cynthia read all about him, taking delight in the kind of young man he had become. The little kid who gifted her sweets and cakes and talked about his fantasies was now in charge of $1 billion empire. Her heart swelled each time she read about his exploits. So much time had passed between them, but Donald still felt as ever-present as he had always been. Then, one day, disaster struck. Donald had just celebrated his 20th birthday in style. It was a flamboyant ceremony that hosted the biggest names in the country. The next day, however, the premise housing his office was attacked by some paid thugs sent from a rival company. Donald was targeted and shot several times. His security managed to put the intruders away and sent for the paramedics. Donald was quickly rushed to the hospital. He was still alive, but he had lost a lot of blood and needed a transfusion to replace what had been lost. There was enough blood in the hospital's blood bank, but as the doctors ran a test on his body, they discovered a startling obstacle about his case. Donald belonged to a special genetic blood group. This meant that he could not accept donations from any kind of blood group. Only someone with the exact same special blood could donate to save him. When Mr. George showed up, he was informed about it. The doctors tested his blood for confirmation, but found out he was not a match. Mr. George refused to explain that he was not Donald's real father. He offered millions of dollars and urged the doctors to find anyone with a similar blood group for the transfusion. Meanwhile, Donald was in a coma, and time was running out really fast. When Cynthia read about the incident in the papers, a shrill ran down her spine. She knew how urgent his situation was, and she could not sit by and watch him pass away, like his mother and cousin. Without wasting a moment, Cynthia got her things ready and prepared to leave for New York the following day. "Where are you leaving to?" her employer, Mr. Johnson, asked. "I need to meet my son," she lied. "He is in a critical condition in a hospital." Cynthia was not so sure if her blood would match Donald's for the transfusion. She only took a leap of faith and hoped that it would save the boy's life. Maybe, just maybe, they would become a match, and she would make Donald live again. "Donald must live," she whispered over and over again as the train rode its way to New York. Just as they arrived, she took a taxi and rode to the hospital. "You again?" Mr. George snarled as soon as he recognized Miss Cynthia. "Why do you keep following Donald about? What do you want from him this time?" "I just want to try my blood," Cynthia stammered breathlessly. "Maybe it will work on him, who knows?" "No, it won't," George growled indignantly. "Donald's blood is royal. It cannot belong to a tramp like you." "Sir, we are done with the test," a nurse interrupted Mr. George. "We just discovered that the woman's blood is a perfect match for your son," she announced, pointing at Cynthia. George was stunned. "You mean her?" he snarled. "Yes, sir. Now we need to proceed with the transfusion immediately. Please come with me, Miss Cynthia." Mr. George looked at them in surprise, unable to believe his ears. A few hours later, the transfusion was over, and the doctors began to fix the wounded organs in Donald's body. He had not yet opened his eyes, but there was hope that he would survive the process. Cynthia was the heroine of the moment. Her name was all over the news. The strange lady who had shown up to save the dying son of a billionaire. As she sat at the bed beside Donald, she caressed his head affectionately, feeling relieved that he would finally live again. Her hands touched his right ear, and suddenly, her heart leapt in surprise. The ear had a hole, a pierced hole that felt too familiar to Cynthia. Memories came crowding back, and then she remembered. The day before her baby was taken, she had pierced his right ear with a thick ring, and listened as he cried his eyes out in agony. Now, as she touched Donald's ear, the whole came back to mind. She began to contemplate deeply on the turnout of events. Why did Donald share so many similarities with her missing son? His eyes, the way he breathed, why was he so close to her? And the ear? Was her mind playing tricks on her? Or was she imagining too much? Cynthia felt she was owed an explanation. She walked up to the doctor and demanded a DNA test. "We were about to suggest the same thing," the doctor replied. "You both share so many similarities that make us believe this is not just a coincidence." Mr. George was very indignant when the DNA idea was discussed with him. "It cannot be," he argued, shaking his head proudly. "Donald is a product of royalty, not some strange woman's son." Even as he spoke, he had a nagging feeling that the truth was about to be exposed. Was this the moment? He wondered. Was his secret about to be displayed to the entire world? But eventually, he was pressured into accepting the deal. And, after the tests were done, to everyone's surprise, the results matched with Donald's DNA. Cynthia's eyes glistened with surprise. The revelation was too stunning to be true. 1 week later, Donald eventually opened his eyes. As he looked around the ward, Cynthia called him gently. "What am I doing here?" he asked. "And you, who are you?" "Look at me, Donald. Just look closely." Donald did and suddenly realized who it was. "Aunt Cynthia," he gasped in a whisper. "What are you? Dear God, I've missed you so much." He reached out to hug her, but the clamps held him back. "Call me Mum," Cynthia whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I am your mother, Donald. Your real mother." Donald flustered. "What do you mean?" he asked, drawing closer. "What about Natalie? She has always been my mum." "It's a puzzle we are still trying to solve," Cynthia explained. "But for now, all you need is rest. When you are strong enough, we will talk all about it." Some weeks later, Donald was officially discharged from the hospital. That evening, after dinner in their penthouse, Donald sat with Cynthia and his father in their living room. The atmosphere at that moment was tense. There was a lot to talk about. Cynthia began by narrating everything that had happened in her life from the moment Donald was born, the day he went missing, the blood donation, and then the DNA results. When she was done, Donald glared at his father indignantly. "Is it true, Dad?" he growled. "Did you take me from her and make me your son?" "Let me explain, Donald," George began hesitantly. "There is nothing to explain, Father," he yelled. "You stole the only baby of a homeless woman and made him your own. What is there to talk about, apart from how inconsiderate and heartless you acted? Did you ever care about how she felt? Or the trauma you caused? How did I ever end up calling you my father? My God, I can't believe this." "Donald, I know I did a bad thing," George admitted, shifting closer to him. "But please, hear me out. Just hear me out." And Mr. George went on to explain all that happened from his end. The prophecy from Master Zoltar, and his desperation to find an heir. In spite of all he said, Donald still remained adamant. After a series of arguments, he stomped out of the house, threatening never to return again. George thought it was all a bluff, but days passed, and Donald did not return. George began to panic. He sent emissaries to Donald to help plead on his behalf. So many of them tried to, but Donald was insistent and remained resolute. It was too painful to believe that he had been sold a lie all his life. He felt his dad was worse than the devil. Cynthia, who was undecided all this while, finally visited him, and they had a long talk together. She tried to make him reason with Mr. George. "Put yourself in his situation, Donald," she said, "and maybe you will relate with why he did it. Also, think about how different it would be if you were raised on the street by a homeless woman. You would definitely not be the man you are today, huh? Mr. George has tried for you, raising you up to this and being willing to surrender his empire to you. Just think about it, son, and you will find a reason to forgive him." Donald asked for a few days to clear his mind. On the fourth day, he walked into the penthouse and stood before Mr. George. George was so excited to see him again. "I will come back to you once again," he revealed after George begged for forgiveness and reacceptance. "But I have just one condition for that. If you still wish to call me your son again, then you have to marry my mother, and let us become family. One family. When you have accepted that, you let me know. Then we can talk." Donald proposed and walked out of the house. Mr. George needed no more conviction to accept the deal. A few days later, he called and agreed to all Donald had said. It was time to move forward. Time for forgiveness and reconnection. Weeks later, George and Cynthia married in a small, happy ceremony. Donald stood beside them, smiling for the first time in weeks. He was now the official heir to the Kensington name. The family wasn't perfect, but they were together, and their destinies were aligned forever. Dear viewers, were you touched by the events in this story? If so, please take a moment and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Thank you.